Hey. Folks, what do you see here? What do you see? Stars, okay. What do you see now? Nothing, it's empty. Hopefully not like your stomach, there will be food in a bit, no worries. But also, this is how your console should look like when you develop, when you ship to production, should be empty, right? But sometimes you might see some weird stuff, something like this, for example. Right, yeah, it's a bit small, okay, let's zoom in. Anybody see this error message ever? Type error, can't access property, parent node is undefined. Anybody ever bother with that? A few people here, yeah, okay, I see a few hands, that's good, that's good. Or maybe this one, yeah? Mismatching child nodes versus V nodes, parent, huh? What the hell? And yeah. Honestly, it's hard to figure out. But all these, when you Google, might come up some blog post that's about hydration errors. And we want to take a look at hydration and actually demystify it. So welcome to my talk, Vue.js Hydration Demystified, here at Vuejs Amsterdam 2024. A few words about me. I'm Alex. As Mark already said, I am a web engineering consultant. I'm also a speaker and instructor, as you can see here, obviously. Part of the Nuxt team, and I'm also on various socials. Maybe some of you have seen a YouTube video or a stream already talking about Vue, Nuxt, JavaScript, TypeScript. Of course, it's a website, and I'm active on GitHub, so maybe you've faced some Nuxt issues saying like, oh yeah, that's on you. Might be me. First question. Adam already talked about rendering modes. Who of you is using SSR? Hands up, folks, hands up. Okay, yeah, roughly half of you. Okay, the other half of you, really, I envy you a little bit because you never bother with hydration errors. That's the good part. That's fine. Like when you ever turn on SSR, you might hit them. But why? What is hydration actually? And why are JavaScript developers so thirsty? Well, thanks. Thanks. We start with a very, very simple, tiny thing there, a tiny green square. This is when, for example, your browser requests a page and gets something back. And when it will get something back, it will be the HTML when using server-side rendering, some inline CSS for styles, and the serialized state. So basically, the server renders your whole application, and then somehow has to transmit, oh yeah, these are the values that the client should get, right? And at that point, the site is visible, right? The user can see things, amazing, see all your cool things that you wrote, but it's visible, it's not interactive yet. Because here's the interesting part. Then the JavaScript comes in, right? The user has to download the JavaScript in the browser, parse and execute it, and more or less what Vue is doing is it's replaying, quote unquote, what's happening on the server. It's like initializing the components, it already initialized on the server as well, and it takes the HTML step by step and creates their own representation, the own virtual DOM representation, and at some point you also maybe want to attach some listeners for activities, saying, oh, if I click on that button, something should be executed, right? And at that point, after these 3 blocks, your site is interactive. And then maybe some client-side logic comes, right? Some unmounted things. That's it. And that's more or less the life cycle of the initial request, what's happening. And now the question is, okay, what is hydration of that part? Well, the thing between these 2 red lines. That's hydration. And it's a bit of an uncanny valley, because your site is visible, and if the user clicks on it, nothing happens, because the JavaScript is still downloading, or the listener is not attached yet, and so on and so on. So it's tricky. We want to reduce the part as much as possible. But before we take a look into, okay, how can we maybe avoid that? Do we need that? Why? We go back to the errors. How can this actually fail? Because in a way, it's like, okay, the server sends things over, must be fine, right? Spoiler? No. Usually it's fine, but sometimes it can't be. If the state is different, if the server sends something and the client expects something else, and they're like, okay, must be a bug in your logic. Yeah, in a way, but let's dig into that. There's a very simple example to start first where the server state, or actually the server HTML, and the browser HTML might not match. And that would be if you write invalid HTML. If you have a look at this, right? A P and a div. Anybody did something like that? Ever put a div and a P? Of course, nobody. Yeah, sure. Me neither. Okay, never ever. But if you do that, the browser would say like, hey, look, that's not how you do it. We just do this. We just remove the div, we scrap it, because, hey, that's not okay. So if you haven't noticed, it's not allowed. You are not allowed to put a div and a P, right? Or an anchor tag and an anchor tag. You can't link inside a link. Like, who thinks about that? Of course, the problem is if the server sends this and the client gets this, yeah, we have some different expectations here. It won't really work out, and the client will say, hey, look, that div you sent over there, I don't have it. I don't get it. Or the other way around, like I want a div, but it's not there because it's already fixed. So yeah, that's a problem. And what's the solution? Well, properly write your HTML and validate it. There's, for example, a Nuxt module for that, but you can also run any kind of HTML validator saying, okay, things work pretty well. All right, and what's worse than making your own mistakes? Letting others do them for you, right? Like scripts manipulating your HTML, thinking, oh yeah, awesome. I want to optimize my HTML, minify everything out of it, and then you run into problems. Why? Well, let's take a look at this. Anybody ever seen like these weird comments there, this tiny thing there, this like HTML comments with like a square bracket? Anybody ever seen that? Yeah, you should check your source code. It's in there, I promise, because that's basically indicating if you have like a fragment component without a root or like a v4 or some template, like, okay, this is the start and this is the end. Because we don't need a single root anymore in Vue 3, right? So we have to somehow tell Vue, hey, look, that might be something, so you can figure out what is what. And the problem is if you say, like, yeah, get rid of all the HTML comments, we don't need them, well, then we'll do this. So there's no indication where something starts and ends, and once again, that will trip up Vue when we actually check this out, right? When Vue thinks like, okay, I searched the start comment, not there. Damn, fail. And of course, if you have optimization scripts, very common, like I see people doing that in Nuxt Discord every now and then, the Cloudflare optimization script, like tick the HTML box, no, but better don't do it, better don't. And there are various others, that's just an example. So yeah, removing these placeholder components, also for VF and so on, or these like fragment delimiters, they will lead to hydration issues because the client can't match the server's HTML anymore. And the solution is pretty simple, just disable them. But the problem is you have to figure out that these scripts are the evil here, right? And not you. Okay, and then we have another one. And now it gets a bit more interesting. Invalid HTML, I know you're all seasoned programmers. You all figure out you never do these mistakes. Script manipulation, I have third-party scripts. No, my marketing department's not adding 100 megabytes of HTML. No, it's all fine. Different data on the server and client. Okay, and here we jump a little bit into Nuxt because it's very easy to showcase. So let's say we have a ref, right? And we use math.random in there. It's fine, right? Okay, good. But as I've explained before, Vue is doing all the component generation, the initialization on the server and on the client. So the value of that ref will also be initialized. The ref will be initialized with different values on the server and the client. So already it's a bit tricky because that will definitely lead to different data unless you're very, very, very lucky and math.random gave the same output twice. But then you should also play Lotto or something. Yeah. So what do we do here? Same with date, by the way. Say like, oh yeah, new date, cool. But server-side rendering, yeah, if you render it, it's, I don't know, second 6. And if we get in the client, it's second 8 or something, or 10, however long it takes. So that's a bit tricky. So what do we do here? What can we do to make sure that there is no any kind of mismatch? And, well, the option would be, why don't we transfer these values over? Why don't we take them, say like on the server, hey, these are the values. You don't have to regenerate them. You can just take them over because they're here already. We generated it once. And in Nuxt, it's pretty easy. You just use useState. It's very important to use a unique key for that by saying, OK, hey, this is my unique key. You can match that and check, OK, was it sent by the server? Then take the value. And if it was not sent because you maybe do a client-side navigation, then it's fine. Just create it new by this initialization function over here. So it's very important that you transfer them over. And if you say, yeah, but I don't know, this is like, I don't need the randomness on the server. I don't need to render that there even. Then why doing it on the server at all? You can just say, hey, set them only on the client, put the whole thing in an onMounted, maybe initialize it with null. And onMounted and onBeforeMounted, they will only be executed on the client side, never on the server. Everything in script setup, both sides. Or in Vue 2, like the good old create and before create on both sides. So yeah, OK. Different data, we got it. We know we have 2 options there, great. And now we get into a little bit more complex things here, like authentication. We love authentication because we need to know which user is going on, but also lots of pains. And if anybody asks here, oh, when does the Nuxt authentication module comes out? I dare you. No, we don't do that here. It's in Evergreen, I know. And let's take a look at things people like to do with authentication that only happens on the client side because you say, OK, on the server, I don't need it. It's fine. I just render my app shell, and the rest is on the client. Typically, people say, yeah, I want to figure out a way to do things only on the client side. And maybe they use something like import.meta.client, or other things. So what they do is, like, we have some is logged in ref, right? And then we just say, yeah, if you're on the client side, set the value to true, right? Or do some off check and so on and so on. And then we send a template, yeah, if you're logged in, you're in, and otherwise you say, please log in. And of course this will not work. Why? Because you never should change the state through import.meta.client. Because then you technically already say, oh yeah, the client, well, that gets totally different values. I basically override what the client should think, and you basically provoke these hydration errors. So that's not a good idea. We already know how to fix that. We just use onMounted. So we've seen it before. Client code, client-only code, please put it in onMount or on before mount. You can also use import.meta.client, for example, to import some very heavy library you only need on the client. That's a different case, because then you don't change the state. You just import some things. And then you can still use onMounted to set some values. All right, by the way, let's look at it once again. So smooth animation, right? So smooth. That's based on Anthony's work. Anthony Fu will be here tomorrow and also here today, creator of SlideF. He pushed that like a couple days ago, and it's amazing. So shout out to him on this place. SlideF is an amazing tool. And back to hydration, there are various other cases, right? We can go list on and on and on, and I don't want to bore you with this because you all have your own issues to resolve, but how, right? How do we do that? It's not an exhaustive list, lots of other cases, but we want to debug them. And maybe some of you, back in the old Vue 2 times, stumbled upon this blog post, like what to do when Vue hydration fails, roughly this layout. Yeah, I wrote about it back then because it was a big problem. Luckily, nowadays, we don't really need that blog post anymore. It's still out there for the people still stuck in Vue 2, fine. But it's a bit easier. So now we have error messages like that. Hydration, text, content, mismatch on, and then we get the element. It's pretty amazing. We don't have to sift through our code, figuring out where it breaks. No, it just gives us the element. And then even says, hey, on the server it should be this, like please log in. And the client says, you're in. That's the example from just right away with the authentication and the import meta client. So now we even know where's the problem, what is rendered on both sides, so we can check what's happening there. And it's pretty smooth. And this works since Vue 3.4. There were improved hydration messages. So it's really nice to work with. And the best part is, hydration, first of all, only happens on the initial request, right? If you go from A to B in the client side, you don't see them because it's involving server state. And often these errors are in production, where you're like, oh yeah, on dev, it's fine, I refresh, it's okay, but maybe I generate my site statically, it's fine. And then I have some issues because something doesn't match anymore. And you usually see these errors, especially in production. But who debugs in production? I mean, some are probably adventurous, but another issue is that even if you say, like, yeah, let's track it down, these hydration checks are very costly because you have to run through the whole DOM, and with big sites, it would be a big performance hit. So they are usually disabled in production, leading to weird error messages that you've seen before. But now if you say, yeah, maybe not production, but like some QA, some staging, you might want to check it out there. You can by a compile time flag, view prod hydration mismatch details, or Nux debug true. Bit shorter. So the good thing is you can debug them now, and it's not as difficult as it was back when I wrote that article, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. So awesome. Also, there is Julian's Nux hydration module. So he's somewhere over there, and also has a talk in a bit. And his module basically renders something like this. So also example from just now, you see that red border, and it's like, oh, hey, that little DOM is hurt. Let's fix it, please. Please. And then you can click on it and be like, yeah, your fault, your mistake. There you go. That's the component, it's app, and that's what's rendered. Amazing. So even with the module, we have some better debugging options. Cool. OK, now we know we can debug hydration, we know what it is, but can we actually avoid it? Is there a way to say, look, we want to make it a bit shorter, we don't want to like lie to our users by saying, hey, here's a button, but you can't click on it yet. Wait a little bit. So can we avoid it? And it's a bit of a trick question, because yeah, we can. The easiest way is we don't include JavaScript. Cool, right. But also means no interactivity, right? We have in Nux, we have something called NoScript as a feature flag. You can do that. I also do it for small sites if I don't need interactivity, right? We'll see one of them later on in a QR code. But of course, the problem is if you want something doing with view and interactivity, it's a bit tricky, right? You can still do this per page, saying, oh, this page, don't need it. This page, yeah, better do. I want that modal to open. But yeah, if JavaScript would be needed, you'd actually need to write it in vanilla JavaScript and inject it, because otherwise nothing is there. And otherwise you would start getting view again, and well, let's spare that. So can work for very simple sites, otherwise tricky. then we can say, hey, why couldn't we infer the data from the markup, like the HTML sent over, right? Why can't we just take that and say, ah, yeah, there is our state? The problem is, we don't always send all the information through the HTML. Like with the auth example, we render a string or another string. Now we can say, yeah, that string means authenticated, otherwise not. But more complex examples would mean different parsing, and it's not really possible to do that in a safe way. So it doesn't really work. For some easy scenarios, might work, sure. Also, this would be something to implement on like the framework level, or yeah, do a bit more work there. But there are two things we can consider. What should be hydrated and when? These are the two key points. And we'll have a look into both of them. What to hydrate, basically partial hydration. And we heard about it a little bit already in Adam's talk about island hydration, island architecture, not island hydration. So we can say with Astro, for example, or Eels.js, let's just define things that need to be hydrated. The rest is fully static. Awesome, that's great. But the thing is, when we have a big static or content-heavy site, it's awesome. At some point, it might be like, hey, we have lots of tiny islands, like, okay, here, for example, there. Yeah, the image carousel, the slider, that should definitely be interactive. The rest, like the text, I don't need it to be interactive, and so on. But as soon as you have more and more things that need to be rendered, because everything is interactive, it's more the other way around. You maybe want to specify what is static. But we'll come to that in a bit. First, we have a look when to hydrate. That's the other thing we can change. Progressive or lazy hydration. Maybe you heard about it. Well, Evan mentioned it in the morning, so I hope you catch that. And the idea is we want to delay the hydration to a later point. We want to say, OK, we don't need everything to hydrate straight away. Maybe you want to do nothing by default. And if you hover over the button, then it should be hydrated. Then the listener should be attached. Or on scroll, or on click, or on browser idle, whatever. This is amazing if you have a very bad initial load time, because that will improve it. We don't have like all these CPU cycles used for it. But the problem is you can actually cause problems and make the user wait longer. It's like, oh yeah, please hydrate that very complex component. When the user clicks on it, it's like, okay, I click on the button, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Oh, finally, the modal. Horrible. Also, there is something called INP, interaction to next paint. It's measured. This is core web vital up until next month. Like in the March, it will be changed. And this measures in the field, so with real-time user, like actual user data, what the interaction time to next paint is. So how long the user have to wait after clicking something until something appears. Very basically spoken. So we want to get that value up because it's also a ranking factor. And that means with delayed or progressive hydration or lazy hydration, it's nice, but you have to be very careful to do this. And it works already. Like we have some modules for that. We have some plugins for Vue. That's fine. But of course, it would be nicer if that's included in the core. Exactly. And now, what if we think of islands but different, right? What if we could render components only on the server, but we don't need to hydrate them. We just get the HTML and insert it straight away. But they can still be interactive. There would just be another HTML call. HTTP call to get HTML or some JSON. And even you could maybe insert client-side component, these server-side components. Yeah, we have something like that. Next server components, reversed islands, more or less. But please watch Julian's talk about it. I don't want to spoil anything, so remember that phase there. OK. Last but not least, what's next in terms of hydration, or what's next, no, in Vue.js and hydration? We heard Evan already, like, there will be some improvements. But first, the user decomposable. Really looking forward to that. There's already implementation next to fill the gap for now, but it should come from the framework. It will be really nice, so we can get IDs that are random in a way in the server, but they preserve the whole thing and are also deterministically approached on the client side. So we don't have a mismatch there. Especially nice if you have like area labeled by or want to set an ID for a form. So yeah, that would be amazing. Looking really forward to that. Then there is a hook coming to react when mismatches happen on hydration. It's a PR pending, as you can see here. And yeah, also this will help greatly with debugging the hydration errors even more. And of course, there are more improvements coming. Vapor mode will also be really interesting to see. Will hydration be different there? There's some optimization potential that we'll see in the coming versions of Vue, so I'm really looking forward to that. Recommendations for a better hydration experience with Vue Next. Next delay hydration until there's native support. There's also a Vue delay hydration module for that. The Next hydration module for debugging, as mentioned before. Daniel's Next.js HTML validator module to make sure your HTML is valid, but I know you all know semantic HTML, so all good. And very important, Get error logging and tracking. Because first of all, you want to log all your users' errors anyway and figure out, oh, I didn't test that scenario. How would you ever know? Don't want to have it online saying, oh, I can't buy something from your shop. Tricky. So better get some error logging and tracking, because then you also catch these. Brief summary. Hydration is necessary when using Vue and SSR, at least if you want to have some interactivity. Hydration mistakes can happen for various reasons. We saw a few things over there, but they can be debugged and fixed easier now since Vue 3.4. And the hydration experience, especially for users, can be improved with modules and also with server components. Future hydration implementations and improvements are also planned. So, hydration demystified? Hydration demystified. Nice. Happy. But there is one more thing. There's one more thing. One important thing. Maybe some of you know that guy, Michael Thiessen. Amazing dude from Canada. Met him at Vue Toronto, for example, in November. And yeah, that guy you also know. And we want to show you something, which is deja vu. So we've planned a project for a while now, which will release in March 2024. You can have a look at dejavu.fm, which might hint already what it could be, what might be missing in the current Vue landscape. And yeah, I thought I'd take the time here on that stage to tease that already a little bit. Take a look at the website. And I'm very curious what you'll think. Last but not least, thanks a lot to, thanks. Thanks a lot to my sponsors, and thanks a lot for your attention. That's it now for real. Enjoy the food. And here are the slides.